Oh, hello there. I was just reading this massive rulebook to this gigantic game that I'll never get to play due to my diminutive size. Now, I'm Mini Mike. You might remember me from various films like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids and The Indian in the Cupboard. I'm here today to give you my 10 favorite small box board games. So let's get started. Starting our list at number 10 is Tenby. Tenby is a cute card drafting game where you build a seaside town of terraces, piers, and landmarks across 10 rounds, with the keks that the highest numbered action cards do more but cost turn order position. I was reluctant to put this game on the list due to how new it was and how it sort of reminds me of various other tableau card building games. However, there is something about this game that I find quite relaxing to play. I just love the classic turn order system where you are incentivized to sometimes grab the weaker day card just to make sure you go first for the next time. It's this beautiful balance between greed and delayed gratification where you're fighting temptation to grab the best possible available card instead of thinking tactically towards, future rounds. It just adds more things to think about. In a small box game, that is everything to me. You will notice that there's a prevailing theme of this list where it's like big strategy with very little rules overhead. Every card in Tenby acts as its own little spatial puzzle. The cards themselves, they score based on their proximity to specific visual characteristics on other cards, such as light posts or seagulls. These demands often vary so widely that the game feels fresh and interesting with each new playthrough by forcing you to constantly tactically adapt to the available cards on display. But it's not just constant reactionary turns. You do need a good amount of foresight in this game. You need to plan several moves ahead to accommodate for potential scoring opportunities. And the more you learn the many decks, the better you get at this enjoyable process. And being able to decide what street the card goes in and when you draft it provides the extra layer of depth that you have to consider on every single turn. I don't often talk about the appearance of most games, but there is something to be said about the charming design on this one that makes it more approachable to families. It's cute, almost deceptively so, and I can explain it fairly easy. However, the more a player puts into the game, the more richness the experience becomes, and the more strategy becomes apparent. Plus, it has its own soundtrack, and really, if a game isn't going to go that extra mile and give you sick jams to play on game night, why then bother playing at all? I don't know if YouTube will allow me to play the music, so instead I'll just play something that closely mimics the vibe of that music. Let's go. At 9 is the one versus many game, Not Alone. Not Alone is an asymmetric one versus many survival card game set on an alien planet, where the crash-landed humans secretly pick locations to visit each round while a lone alien player tries to predict and ambush them. This is a game that absolutely nobody talks about, and yet it perfectly distills the essence of what makes a one versus many game so enjoyable. Every turn, the humans play a card face down, showing where they're going to be going for the round. As an alien, you're doing your best to utilize your intuition, but you're not doing it blindly because you're using the powerful abilities on the location cards themselves to be sort of your guide to where the humans will end up and which powers they need for the round. The mind games are the entire driving force of this game. Every turn is one of prediction and sort of like misdirection. Plus, the game is so beautifully short that it never overstays its welcome and instead delivers you all that fun you would have in a game like, say, like Fury or Dracula, but distilled within a 15 or 20 minute time frame. But my favorite part about the game mechanically is the discard pile of each human is visible, so the chances of an alien player catching a human rises as more cards are played. But that creates even more tension beyond the obvious lowering of survival odds, because now, as a group, you can use another player's vulnerability to gain access to highly powerful locations, since you assume the hunter will go to one of the last two spots the weakened human is capable of going. Except maybe the hunter knows that, and they're going to use that against you and be waiting there for you. Not Alone is accomplishing so much with just so little. The game is just excitingly tense where every turn is filled with tough decisions and huge consequences. Every turn feels tense and meaningful, and every action feels like it could spell doom or the end of the game. The human team does its best to collaborate, but with the alien in the room with them, that only leaves these sort of like subtle suggestions and possible misdirections, or just loads upon loads of shit talk, which is usually what occurs in my games. And when you're playing as that alien and you keep catching a single person at their location and they give you this look like they generally at that moment think you're reading their mind, it's just a cool feeling. Not Alone is a brilliant small box, one versus many game. And at number 8 is a social bluffing game, Skull. Skull is an almost pure bluffing game where everyone secretly stacks flowers and skull discs, then bids on how many flowers they can flip without hitting a skull. Kim and I are not the biggest fans of bluffing games. I enjoy them more than she does, but we both get a kick out of this social tension and fun reveals that Skull provides. On a turn, you decide to either play a coaster down or state a number of coasters you plan on revealing. Anyone is welcome to say a higher number than yourself, and the highest number reveals that many coasters, crossing their fingers that they don't flip a skull. It's so simple and yet so charming. It's one of those games that sort of rewards mind reading, or at the very least, feeling that you know more than what you likely do. You feel so delightfully devious as you throw a skull face down, and then on your next turn announce to everyone that you'll be flipping some lowball number of coasters, only to be laughing internally because you know someone will take the bait and state a higher number and then immediately flip your skull over. You did it. You tricked them. They fell for your master plan. Or they didn't. And now you have to flip your own skull over and look like a complete idiot, and everyone laughs at you around the table. Listen, that sounds horrific, but I promise you that either conclusion is a hilariously good time at the table. Skull is a game that you can play with literally anyone. The rules are wonderfully intuitive, setup is virtually non-existent, and it plays at a variety of different player counts. It, like many games on this list, perfectly capture the essence of its genre and deliver one of the best bluffing games you will ever find in such a tiny box. And number 7 is the 2-player game, Duel for Cardia. Duel for Cardia is a tight 2-player duel where you and your opponent draw from symmetric decks and time card plays to collect faction signets while using other abilities to disrupt each other. Cardia is a fantastic little mind game in the box where you're constantly attempting to balance short-term gains with long-term investment, because you may play a card that appears weak at first because it doesn't secure you the signet, but when combined with a card you play later, it becomes fundamental in shifting the tides in your favor. I love stuff like that, and I find Cardia does a great job of making such a simple decision space feel very tense and very meaningful. And the best part is that you're both operating for symmetrical decks. You know what powers rest in your opponent's deck, but you don't know what sits in their hand currently. So you have this like perfect balance between strategic planning and the tense suspense of the unknown. The more you play, the more you learn the deck. But more importantly, you learn your opponent's behaviors and you get a better sense of when they're bluffing or when they're holding a super powerful card in their hand. It's a fascinating experience every single time, and while I enjoy it on BGA, it's a game I think best played in person for that real human experience and tension. And if you ever get bored of the same characters, well, you can add a little modularity to extend the game's life with a second deck of scene cards and characters, both of which meaningfully increase the tactical variety and make the game feel fresh each time. But what's really cool is that even just playing with someone new makes the entire game itself feel new, because you have to go through and learn the intricacies and subtleties of that person and how they play. It just makes the game a lot more interesting. Cardia is a fantastic little 2-player game, and with all the unique card powers, variety of decks, and locations, it really feels like you're getting a lot for such a low price point and a physical footprint. It's a game worth having in your collection to play when someone comes over early on a game day. And at number 6 is the always chaotic Innovation. Innovation is a civilization card game built on a small deck of wildly powerful cards where you play and activate effects to build engines, raid opponents, and race for achievements. Innovation might be the purest expression of this tireless theme, an absurd amount of strategy crammed into a very tiny stack of cards. On your turn, you get just 2 actions. You draw a card, meld one from your hand onto the 5 other color stacks, fire off the dogma effects and one of your top cards, or you cash in to claim an achievement. That's the whole game. And yet these dogma effects are so amazing. They're so stupidly overpowered that the thing becomes this escalating arms race of broken combos that just feels immensely satisfying. What ties it all together are the little icons on every card. As you pile up cards of the same color, you can fan them left, right, and up to expose more of the icons that are hiding underneath. And suddenly, that pile becomes an engine sort of pumping out exactly the resources you need. Because nearly every dogma cares about icons. When you trigger one of those big effects, every opponent who has as many feature icons as you gets the same. And the demand effects only hurts the players who have the fewest. So every card feels completely broken, yet the design subtly keeps it all in check. unleash something busted, and you've likely just handed an opponent icons or the window to unleash something just as busted in return. The result is a game of enormous momentum swings. One turn, you're staring at your board, ready to concede. 3 dogmas later, you're raiding half of your opponent's tableau and dump their best cards. And now, you're somehow winning. And it stays anyone's game right up until someone snatches that final achievement. I won't lie to you, your first game will feel like complete chaos and you will likely get stomped without fully understanding why that happened. But but once it clicks, things that seem very random at first and maybe even stupid all start making sense and the game gets super rewarding. And with 100 something completely unique cards where the order they come out reshapes every single game, plus a price tag that is so cheap of how much game is just in this box, innovation more than earns its spot here. It's a tiny stack of cardboard that plays like something 5 times its size. And number 5 is the hand management game, Marvel Remix. Marvel Remix is a hand building game where you draw and discard to sculpt a 7-card hand of heroes, villains, and locations into the highest scoring web of combos before the discard pile triggers the end. Marvel Remix is a beautifully well-refined example of hand management. On your turn, you simply draw a card from the deck or the shared discard pool and then discard a card. That's it. You're doing your best to sculpt the perfectly curated hand of power synergy between each hero, abilities and cities, and all thematically pulled from the comics. And each draw is exciting as you cross your fingers hoping you get the perfect card from the deck to facilitate some huge scoring at the end of the game. Or better yet, the mixture of sort of anticipation and anxiety when the card you need more than anything is discarded by another player, but you have to wait 2 more turns before you can take it for your own hand. Sculpting the perfect 7-card hand into combos feels immensely satisfying and provides the simple game with a surprising amount of depth. Granted, Marvel Remix may not have the depth of a larger game, but it does an amazing job of testing your ability to tactically adapt, especially to the villain requirement, which adds some amazing tension. Every player must have at least one villain in their hand at the end of the game, and they all have negative powers that demands that you sort of work around them in a specific manner. And when you find a way to make that negative force, that villain power, work in your advantage, you feel like this tactical genius. And once you feel you've achieved the perfect endgame hand of a villain, heroes, and powers, well, now you rush the endgame and force others to suffer the panic of knowing they may not have optimized perfectly. This added element of player-controlled end adds an awesome amount of strategy to an otherwise very simple game. Yeah, I get some of the criticisms of this game. The game can feel completely random sometimes, and you'll have these moments when you'll look at your friend's hand by the end of the game and wonder if he had divine intervention. But at a 15-minute playtime, I just don't care. Marvel Remix is an awesome small box game that is definitely worth a look. Coming at number 4, we have the card shedding game, Ruins. Ruins is a card shedding and climbing game that uses the transparent card crafting system, where players race to build the perfect cards, which carry over onto future rounds, all to get as many points as possible. The card crafting in this game provides this incredibly satisfying escalation of combos, where your upgrades stack with each previous upgrade. On any given turn, you rarely feel that you're at the will of the draw, like many other card shedding games. Instead, you're constantly scanning the upgrade pool to see if you can make what's in your hand work in your favor. This simple addition to the genre adds an immense amount of depth, and an additional element I have to consider on any given turn. And perhaps more importantly, it makes you feel a lot more clever when you're playing. And what's cool is that the entire deck evolves over each additional round, since some cards people upgrade end up right back into the shared pool to be dealt out for the next round, creating this beautiful power creep where collectively all players start so staggeringly weak, but by the end, every player is laying down more and more cards, more than you ever thought possible in a card shedding game. Adding an element of progression and pacing to a card game feels like an amazing design feat. But maybe you don't want other people benefiting from your hard work. Well, you can claim up to 2 different cards to keep between rounds, so that perfectly beefed up unit of a card you made will belong to you and you alone. Just this simple design decision of a very limited resource, since you can only keep 2, adds yet another layer of depth to this otherwise very simple small box game. You're agonizing every time you upgrade a card, wondering if this is the one you need to keep between rounds, and jumping for joy when your opponent lets slip his own powerful card without claiming ownership. It is a great added dynamic. The game just allows for an immense amount of flexibility and puts a spotlight on players that are able to quickly adapt and overcome. It's a small box game that's punching well above its weight class, and it's one I love having in my collection. At number 3, we have the tableau builder, Forest Shuffle. Forest Shuffle is a tableau drafting card game where you build a personal woodland by planting tree cards and tucking animals, plants, and fungi around them to form scoring combos. Yes, this game has a ridiculous table sprawl, and yes, this game can be a little swingy sometimes, especially without the latest expansions. But man, I really do love this game. Forest Shuffle is an incredibly simple turn structure where you're either playing a card into your forest or drawing two cards from the discard pool or the deck. But the beauty of this game is how much depth is able to be packed within such a very limited decision space. Because now I'm worried that the card I use to pay for the other card is going to be one that my opponent needs. I'm debating if I should push my luck and pray for more deer cards or just ditch the deer and play a different animal card. Forest Shuffle is just layer upon layer of decisions. And each card is multi-use, a mechanic I've always loved, simply because it adds to that decision space. It feels like a hell of a sacrifice when you're choosing to play a card for the mushroom to put it under the tree, even though you might really need that animal to get points for a different combo. Plus, each card has a specific power, but that only triggers if you get rid of cards with the same symbol, making the simple act of discarding cards this sort of like beautiful, painful decision. Every turn is like this incredibly complex puzzle, and again, it's all facilitated by rules that I could explain to a new player in a matter of minutes. And while there isn't a lot of interaction, that shared pool of discards can be fairly cutthroat once you get better at the game. Every card you pay goes straight to that discard pool, but it can only hold 10 cards before refreshing, and so you might end up holding on to a card you know your opponent needs just to discard at the last second to force the refresh of the pool. This becomes an even tighter competitive space when it's only yourself and one other person, because now you're carefully keeping track of what they're picking and what they're avoiding, leaving you to better manage the pool to your advantage. Forest Shuffle is a brilliant game and one I'll happily put up with the dreadful amount of time it takes to score at the end of the game because it's just that good. At number 2 is the absolute classic, Citadels. Citadels is a role drafting city building game where each round players secretly pick a character with a unique power, then bluff and deduce who took what to build the most valuable medieval city. Citadels is an absolute classic and has been in my collection now for I think almost 25 years. There's just so much game packed in such a tiny little box. You have this awesome role selection phase where you're doing your best to socially maneuver and outbluff your opponents, while simultaneously selecting the role that best benefits your current tableau, providing you powers that you need. But maybe that's what you want your opponents to believe. You're not going to pick the bishop this round because you have 3 blue buildings and you get gold from them. No, instead you'll pick the king because you want to be the first player. And then you did it. Now you'll never be assassinated or you'll never be stole from this round. Oh wait, the current king picked the thief and he just wanted revenge for taking first player away from him. You forgot to take pettiness into your social calculations. And when you're not secretly drafting from the shared deck of role cards for special powers, you're building an engine. The city you laid down, card by card, is slowly getting stronger and accumulating more abilities and gold bonuses. The cards that you laid down sort of stand as a barometer of how well you navigated the role selection, and also exemplify your ability to make the most of the building cards you've pulled from the deck, because Citadels asks you to adapt not just to the players around the table and what their behaviors are and what their needs are, but also to the small hand of cards you draw from a large pool of building cards. Balancing those two needs is an immense amount of fun and the reason why Citadels has stuck around for so incredibly long. And like Cardia, you have a whole other set of characters in this box, not to mention loads and loads of different buildings. And you can mix and match almost all of it, making setup easy and variety immense. Hell, I'll let you in a little secret. My friends and I, over the last couple of decades, have played hundreds of games of Citadels, and almost none of them have included the almost none of them have included those new characters. We've never felt unsatisfied with just the base characters. And I think that should tell you something. This game is fantastic and an easy entry in the second best small box board game of all time. And the best small box board game of all time is Castle Combo. Castle Combo is a 9-card tableau builder where you spend coins to buy villagers and nobles from a shared market and slot them into a 3x3 grid. This game is constantly through the simplest rule set and limited decision space, forcing you to make immense trade-offs and decisions. Do you block your opponent from getting the perfect card he needs by refreshing the row? Or do you draft that card that fits perfectly into your red shield scoring column? The game is doing so much on any given round, balancing constant optimization, the thrill of discovery, and push your luck as you refresh a row, and crossing your fingers, the perfect card comes out. But using that key to refresh a row or move the messenger pawn to the other row is a painstakingly tense decision, because those keys are worth points at the end of the game, and they're a very limited resource. That limitation on their use adds yet another layer to the constant challenge and important decisions that you must make every single round of this game. And it makes every turn feel meaningful, despite the fact that you're only drafting from like 6 cards. And yet within that choice is a plethora of options, because you also have to decide where in that tableau, once you've taken the card, where in your tableau that card will go. And to make it even better, I'm incentivized to pay close attention to what my opponent is doing, which is something you rarely get in these sort of like much larger and more complicated tableau builders. Aside from hate drafting, I can purposely move the messenger pawn to a level where I know my opponent doesn't want it to be. And I can do it with complete plausible deniability so they don't hate me by the end of the game. And those were the 10 best small box board games from the perspective of a 2-inch tall man. I hope you enjoyed this video. It cost me like millions of dollars to make. I had to hire the best graphic artists in the entire planet to make it, to shrink me down to this size. I actually got the same guys who did Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. I asked Rick Moranis to do a guest spot in the video, but he retired from acting, you know, so I didn't have the funds. Primarily, I didn't have the funds because you didn't join my Patreon. If you would have joined my Patreon, then I could have got the money to hire Rick Moranis. So that's your fault he's not here. And it's your fault that all I have is this green screen. This is all I have. I wanted to get one of those treadmills and like paint the whole thing green so I could like do walking animations in front of the green screen, but I don't have a budget for that. So join the Patreon and like and subscribe. 50% of you aren't even subscribed to the channel. What's the deal? And I have been on a tear now going through small box board games and just replaying a bunch of them because I want to make the biggest tier list video I have ever made. So far, I'm at 100 games and I'm just playing more and more and more, and I want to go through all the small box games and just rank all of them. So stay tuned for that. It'll come like probably this month or next month. That's it. Goodbye. Small mic, mini mic, out. All right. That was good. I gotta get better green screen. Okay. The people will be here soon. I can get all this shit unpacked. Kim's not home yet. I could eat the mini eggs. Mini eggs, mini eggs, mini eggs.